morning today, God, I just ask that you would just give Ernie a spirit of
Well, good morning, everyone. It's good to be here, and it's obvious to me that the Lord wants to speak to us about enduring during hard times. Irv told me, Toby, pretty much what you guys shared was taken from my notes. And I guess when that happens, maybe we need to pay attention. But I believe the Lord wants to speak to us this morning, because there are times in our lives that are just hard. And us as a family, we went through some rough times. And so I want to share a bit about that, but one of the things that I want to go to first is I just want to talk about faith. Recently, a couple months ago, I was chatting with a couple guys, and we were talking about faith, and the question came up, what is faith? What actually is it? And I stuttered around. I kind of know what it is, but I stuttered around a bit, and it reminded me of like 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 15. Some of you heard me say this, but this is heavy on my mind because I don't believe that Christians are very good at this, but it says, Peter says that whenever anybody asks you a question about what you believe, you should have a ready answer. And at that moment, I didn't have a ready answer to give. I was just stuttering around, and I don't think that's a good thing for us as Christians to have to stutter around when somebody asks us about what we believe. And so I meditated on this, and I decided I'm going to research it and study it a little bit. And I'm going to come up with a definition that works for me so that next time I've got something tattooed on my mind that's ready. And so I listened to some things and watched some things on YouTube, and I looked at the dictionary. The dictionary says that faith is complete trust or confidence in someone or something. And I think that's true. I think that's right. But I believe it goes a little further than that. And as I studied, and so I came up with this thing that faith is believing and fully trusting in the integrity of something or someone to the extent that it dictates your decisions, how you do life, and so on. I'm going to show you a little bit how this works. I'm going to talk about Raber Dirt Works here a little bit. Steve paid me a lot here to advertise that. But Steve spends thousands and thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of dollars on expensive excavating equipment. Why does he do that? Is it because he just thinks it would be fun to have this as toys? You know? No, he does it because he has faith in his customer base, and that he believes and he trusts in them that if he does work for them, they will pay him, so he can buy expensive excavating equipment to do their work. You see how that works? He has faith in them, and so he then acts on that, and he goes and buys an expensive excavator. And furthermore, when he goes and he buys this excavator, he decides he needs something to do the work with. So he reads an advertisement and reads up on it, and he finds one that he thinks is going to work, and kind of probably researches it a little bit on the internet, and And then he said, I'm going to go look at this one. And so he goes and he drives and looks at this thing, and he gets there and he walks around and he looks under it and acts like he really knows what he's looking for. And he kicks the tires or tracks, and well, things look good. And so finally he crawls up in this thing and he starts it up, and he starts moving levers and stuff. And again, he acts like he really knows what he's doing, but he's checking out to see how this thing operates. Are the hydraulics smooth? Are they how sensitive they are? How much the bucket rattles when he moves? All this stuff, he checks it out, and things check out good. And the more he checks it out, the more faith he now has in this excavator that it will do the work that he wants it to do for his customers that he has faith in. And they will pay him now to do work for him so that he can buy this excavator and pay for that and have money left over to pay Devo and the guys that work for him, and hopefully have money left to buy some cereal for his family. You get the picture how faith works. It's complete trust in something to the extent that it produces, or it dictates, controls it, the things you do, your actions. And this now brings up another point, because we need to be careful what or who we place our faith in. Because one day, this excavator is going to break down, and it's going to let him down, and it's going to cost him money, and he's going to be disappointed in it, and he's going to lose faith in it. Some faith at least. Likewise, his customer base. If the economy goes bad, people will either lose jobs or they get cut back in hours, and they won't be able to afford to have Steve come do work for him. And so his customer base will dwindle, or if the economy gets bad enough, it'll go away. So if we put our faith in things that can let us down, we need to put faith in these things, but there's God that comes in the picture. And we need to be careful where we place our faith. So if we take this analogy now and we say faith in God, what is faith in God? Because we as Christians, that's the definition we need to have tattooed up here in our knower. Okay? So faith in God is believing, or having the assurance, being totally convinced, being confident, and trusting the integrity of God, and that it's good and it's solid and it's perfect and it's without flaw, and that He is sovereign and that He is sitting on the throne, exalted, high and exalted. Having that confidence and trust in God to the extent now that it dictates how we do life, or it orders how we do life, commands maybe, or directs how we do life. It dominates how we do life. You get what I'm saying now? Get that tattooed in your minds. If somebody asks you what faith is, it's believing and trusting in the integrity of God to the point that it now controls and dominates our life. Let me just say, this is something you grow in. It's not something that just is on you, and that the minute you place your faith in Christ, that you have a tremendous amount of faith and that it controls everything in your life. It's a growth process. But this is what faith is. We believe in the God to the point that it now produces a lifestyle that pleases Him. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1 is the faith chapter, and it just starts out, faith is the assurance of things hoped for. It's the conviction of things not seen. It's like we have so much faith in our God that we believe truth even though we haven't seen it. Think of salvation, the blood of Christ. Our hope is in the blood of Christ. And even though we haven't seen, we put our hope, our faith in that. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 7, Paul suggests is that we live or we walk by faith and not by sight. 2 Corinthians 4, verse 18 says, and so we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is seen, not what is unseen. Is exactly what you were talking about, Toby. We don't fix our eyes on what is seen. What is seen here is the life we live, the things we can see, and we make decisions and do life that makes sense to us as we do life, and we should do that. But when we walk by faith, it's like there's another realm to walk in. And whenever God asks us to do something different that what makes sense over here, this should always trump that. Right. Always. Good. Colossians 3, verse 1 and 2, Paul again just talks about setting our hearts on things above and not on things of this earth. And Isaiah chapter 55, verses 8 and 9, one of my favorite verses, because I need to be reminded of this all the time. And it just simply says, for my thoughts are not your thoughts, nor are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. This is the Lord speaking here. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, and that's a long ways. You just think about it's out there. So are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts higher than your thoughts. So as we look at this, and as we look at faith in God, we can see that there's kind of two different realms that we operate in as Christians and as believers. And, you know, we're in this realm of the natural, our natural life, and we do life, and we make our decisions, and we base all these things on what makes sense and so on, and we should do that. But there's this other realm called walking by faith that should trump this all the time. Why do I talk about this first in relationship to walking through hard times? It's because when life gets challenging, when life gets hard, knowing that you're rooted in faith in Jesus Christ, in God alone, knowing that in your knower, you know in your knower that Jesus Christ is who He is, that God is who He is, and that He will do what He says He will do in His Word. Knowing that is what sustains you and gives you something to look back on when life gets hard and really rough. And life can become rough and challenging. Last May 15th, a little over a year ago, it was on Sunday, a day like today. It started out like any other day. Came to church, went home, and got a bite to eat, took a nap. And about 3 o'clock, I woke up, and I was just waking up. My phone dinged, and it was my daughter-in-law, and she was saying in her frantic voice that our grandson, their son, 16 years old, went swimming at his friend's house, and they couldn't find Caden. And so they were were on their way over there to help find him as fast as that Prius would go. And, you know, for us, it changed our lives. It's just been rough. It's just been a hard year. We haven't had a day, kind of a normal day, what you would call normal, before this, since that time. And it's just hard. But here's the thing. I believe we all have hard times. Some of you have also lost loved ones, people you dearly love, in the last couple of years. For some of you, maybe the doctor used the C word, cancer. Use that on you. Or on your spouse. Or maybe your child. Or maybe you just found out recently that your grandchild, 6-year-old grandchild, needs open heart surgery. Niece. Rough times. Hard times. Maybe you're just battling depression. Maybe it's just something that is just always a challenge for you. Maybe it's not really bad, but it's just there. And you just can't shake it. Maybe your finances. Maybe you just lost your job, or you got a big boat payment coming up or something. And it's just the kind of thing that, these kind of things are just, the kind of things that just, like turn your world upside down. Maybe it's your marriage. Maybe your spouse just said, hey, I'm out of here. Or your mom and dad. Some of you, maybe your mom and dad shunned you. Maybe you're still kind of fighting that battle. Things that just come in your life, not necessarily because of bad choices, but they just come in your life unexpectedly, and they're just huge and just kind of turn your world upside down and just dominates your life. It dominates all your thoughts. And God, where are you? You know. That's why we need to be rooted and grounded. I'm going to try to go through 3 stories here in the Bible that kind of take us to that. And the first one is found in Mark 4, and starting at verse 35 to the end of the chapter. But the context here is that Jesus was out by the Sea of Galilee, and he was preaching and teaching all day. And in fact, there was such a large crowd that he just got into a boat, and he kind of got out in the water, and he preached from there. That's the context here. And then in verse 35 it says that as evening came, Jesus said to his disciples, let's cross to the other side of the lake. The Sea of Galilee isn't really all that big. It's like, I think I read it's like 7 miles across and maybe 13 or 14 miles in length. Compare that to Lake Michigan. Look that up. It's like 300 miles in length and 120 across. So compared to the two, you can easily see across to the other side. And so, and they were up in the northern part where the lake kind of narrows down, so they didn't have that far to go across. But they got in the boat. So they took Jesus in the boat and started out, leaving the crowd behind, although there were other boats that followed. But soon, a fierce storm came up. High waves were breaking into the boat, and it began to fill with water. And Jesus was sleeping at the back of the boat with his head on a cushion. The disciples woke him up shouting, "Teacher, don't you care that we're about to drown?" And Jesus woke up, he rebuked the wind and said to the waves, "Silence, be still." It's one of those big long prayers that Jesus prayed right there. Silence, be still. He didn't even end it with, in Jesus' name, amen. And suddenly the wind stopped. There was a great calm. And then he asked, "Why are you afraid? You still have no faith." And the disciples were terrified, and they said, "Who is this man? Even the wind and the waves obey him." I like the way the King James says this. He says, "What manner of man is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" What manner of man is this? Who do we have here? As I look at this story, I want to point out 3 things that are going on here. And the first thing is that they are in a storm. In a fierce storm, it says. In a bad storm. And this is the circumstance that they are in. This storm is so bad, it's life-threatening. They think they're going to die. the waves are splashing into the boat. Now you got to remember, these disciples, some of them were fishermen, and this wasn't their first day out at sea, and this wasn't their first storm, and so they kind of knew how to handle storms. And so I imagine they were bailing water and doing everything they could to keep this boat floating. But this was bad enough. It was out of their control. They couldn't get this thing under control. And it says they were scared. That's how bad it was. These fishermen, these seasoned fishermen, were in such a bad fierce storm that it was out of their control. There was nothing they could do to calm this thing down, and they were doing everything they could to keep the boat afloat, but they couldn't do it. This was their circumstance. This was their storm within a storm. This was the big one that kind of turned their world upside down, like we face. This is their situation, their circumstance. We have our own. And I hope you guys, as you're listening here, things are coming to your mind. Perhaps you're in the middle of one right now, or maybe you've just come out of one, or maybe you're about to face one. And the thing is, if you haven't had one of these, if you keep breathing, you'll have one sooner or later, because it is life. And so we look at the first thing here, it's the circumstances that they're in. Let's look at the next thing, is their emotions now. Emotions are how we react to our circumstance. See, they were scared. Emotions are how we react to our whatever. They can be good, they can be bad. You can be happy, sad, angry, whatever. We've all seen a football game where there was 1 point difference, 2 seconds left in the game, and the team is lined up to kick a field goal. And if the kicker kicks that chunk of pigskin through those 2 steel posts, 3 points. This team wins. What's the reaction? What's the emotion going on there? Oh, our team is the best. We're number one. We have the best players. Our coach and his staff is just amazing. Now, what's the reaction over here on this side? Boo. That guy needs to be fired. We need a new quarterback. However, if this same chunk of pigskin would have missed that steel post by just this much on that side, it would just be reversed. You see how our emotions are just a reaction to our circumstance. And here we have the disciples. Their circumstance, they were in a situation, in a storm in their life where they thought they were going to lose their life. And they were scared. Usually when we are scared and fear crops in, we lose perspective. You see, we get scared when we are looking at our circumstance with our eyes fixed on what is seen and not on what is unseen. And that's what the disciples were doing. And that's what we're all guilty of. When we have things come up in our life, we tend to look at them through eyes that are fixed on what is seen and not on what is unseen. Sometimes our emotions can cause us to believe things are true that are not true. Like the disciples thought they were in a bad enough situation, they were going to lose their life. Jesus, however, where was he? He was in the back sleeping on a cushion. And him being all-knowing, he had a different perspective. He knew they were going to get into this storm, and he was comfortable with it. He was in the back sleeping. You know, as I look at my emotions that I've had and have experienced, and I still do sometimes, you know, to start with, it was just sadness and grief and a lot of pain, and anger, but as time went on, questions would start popping into my head. Like, is His grace sufficient for Caden? How does this make any sense? God, do you even know what you're doing? Why did you do this to my family? Things were going so good. I thank God many times for the way He's blessed us. Just everything. Why'd you do this to my son and his family? You're messing with my son, God. Why? How can anything good come from this? Do you really want to serve a God that treats you like this? I'm just putting this out because this is real life. Like, where are your promises now? Not feeling it. You said, I'll never leave you or forsake you. You seem far away. You said if we cast all our care upon you, because you care about us. Seems to me like you're just in the back of the boat sleeping. I'm not getting it. I'm not seeing it. You just cry out to God, and you cry out to God, and you cry out to God, and all it seems like is that Jesus is in the back sleeping. But you see, I'm looking at that from my perspective, because I'm looking at that through eyes that are fixed on what is seen, and what I'm seeing here. My eyes are fixed on that, and they're not fixed on this walking by faith in that. Our emotions can do a job on us. Again, emotions aren't all bad. God gives us emotions. But emotions don't have any intelligence. They can't think for us. They can't change our circumstances. None of that. They're just emotions. Next thing I want to look at here is now the disciples began to question their theology here. They said, Master, teacher, don't you care that we're about to drown? You see, we're one of your boys. You picked us. We're one of your boys. We've helped you do miracles. We're one of your guys, and we just thought that as long as we're one of your boys, you're not going to put us into things like this. They began to question what they believed about Jesus. See, Jesus never told them that there wouldn't be storms. He never said that would never happen, that they would be completely safe and all that. So they began to question their theology. And if you notice some of these questions that I just read that came into my mind, the same thing was happening. You really want to serve a God that treats you like this? Do you even know what you're doing, God? You see, I found myself questioning the integrity of God. When that became clear to me one morning as I was studying this, that I was just questioning the integrity of God, I thought, that is just bad, to question the integrity of Almighty God. I told God, I am so sorry. Causes you to question your theology. But I believe not only does it do that, I believe that when we're in hard times like this, it exposes flawed theology. You see, we think that we are in the center of God's will and we're walking in obedience, and I will never leave you or forsake you. And Jesus, when he was talking to the disciples, the last verse in Matthew, it says, where Jesus tells his disciples to go to all nations and so on. And the last part of the verse, it says, lo, I am with you always. You see, and what we read into that is that there won't be storms. It exposes flawed theology. And there's many other things, but this is just an example. It exposes flawed theology. I want to move on to Mark chapter 6 now. Just 2 chapters later, we have a similar situation. Context here is that Jesus had just finished feeding thousands of people with 5 loaves of bread and a couple fillet of fish. And so, and the disciples helped with this, so they had to be pumped. I mean, you think about going out there and you passing out bread, and the loaf doesn't get smaller. That's weird. You got to be pumped coming from that. And Jesus, so it says here, they just finished that, and it says, immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to Bethsaida while he dismissed the crowd. And after leaving them, he went up on a mountainside to pray. And later that night, the boat was in the middle of the lake, and he was alone on land. He saw the disciples straining at the oars because the wind was against them. And shortly before dawn, he went out to them, walking on the lake, and he was about to pass them by. But when they saw him walking on the lake, they thought he was a ghost. They cried out because they all saw him and were terrified. And immediately he spoke to them and said, take courage, it's I, don't be afraid. And then Matthew records here, Mark doesn't, but Matthew records the account where Peter then gets out of the boat and he asks Jesus, if it's really you, have me come to you. And Jesus said, come on. And so Peter gets out of the boat and he starts walking on the water. And it's a beautiful example also that when Peter stepped out of the boat, he was walking in faith. And as he was walking on water, all of a sudden, this big old wave shows up. And his eyes switch to this mode of looking at things, fixing our eyes on what is seen. All of a sudden, this wave, and he became doubtful, and he started to sink. You get the different realms there. And it's a beautiful picture. And of course, Jesus caught him and lifted him out of there. It says he got out of the... and when Peter and Jesus then climbed back into the boat, the wind died down, and they were completely amazed. For they had not understood the loaves. Their hearts were hardened. There's a couple things I want us to see here. First of all, Jesus, it says he sent them into the boat. Some translations will say that he insisted they get in the boat and or commanded them to get in the boat. He didn't get in with them this time. He stayed behind. It's kind of interesting. The first time he gets in with them when he sends them into a storm. He gets in with them. This time he stays back and he kind of watches them. He sends them into this boat, and Jesus knew that he was sending them right into the middle of a storm. These disciples were right smack dab in the middle of God's will, walking in obedience. They did exactly what he told them to. They got in the boat, and they went out and they headed out across the lake just exactly like he told them to. And just because we're in the middle of God's will, doing exactly what he wants us to do, doesn't mean there won't be storms. It doesn't mean when you have a storm that God is punishing you for something, or that you're out of his will, anything like that. You can be smack in his will and still walk right smack into the storm. The next thing I want us to notice here is that in verse 48, something I hadn't noticed before. Jesus had been sitting on the mountainside. He was praying. And it says he looked out and he saw them straining at the oars. And so he decided to go out there, walking on water. And it says he was about to pass them by. In the middle of our storms, our crisis, when the storms are raging the hardest, sometimes it feels like maybe he's coming to rescue us, and then he just intends to walk right on past and just ignore. Those are real feelings sometimes, that he's just going to walk right on past and that he doesn't care. And it can seem mean. It can seem mean that he even sent us into the storm to begin with. It can seem mean that he's sitting on a mountainside and he's just out there watching. What do you get out of that, Jesus? But that's from our perspective. That's what we see when we're in the middle of the storm. We see those things. What we don't see and what we don't get is that Jesus was sitting on the mountainside, and it says that he saw them. Even when we're in the middle of the storm, he sees us. He's got his eye on us. He's in control of it. He knows what's going on. Jesus talks about it in Matthew 6, I believe, about the birds of the air, how they don't sow and they reap, but yet your heavenly Father feeds them. How much more valuable are we than they? He sees us. Isn't that comforting to think of that? I want to go to one last story here. John 11. That's a story about Lazarus, and it takes up the whole chapter, but I'm going to kind of ad-lib some of this so we can get through it quicker. John 11, and I'll read the first several verses. It says, a man named Lazarus was sick. He lived in Bethany with his sisters, Mary and Martha. This was the Mary who poured expensive perfume on the Lord's feet and wiped them with her hair. Here we get this, Lazarus, Mary, and Martha. This was the Mary that had spent time anointing Jesus' feet with very expensive perfume. So Lazarus was sick, their brother. And so the two sisters sent a message to Jesus telling him, Lord, your dear friend is sick. These gals, Lazarus, they were in Bethany. Bethany is just a couple miles outside of Jerusalem. Jesus was in Jerusalem. They sent a message to him, come, Lazarus is sick. Jesus could have been there probably in a half hour, just walking. But what did he do? It says he stayed where he was for the next 2 days. That's like your house being on fire and you call the fire department, and 2 days later they show up. Does this, from our perspective, does this look like Jesus cares about his friend and his two friends? Does it look that way? No. But I want to go on, because we get on down to the latter part of the story. It says after 2 days, Jesus finally heads to Bethany. And word gets out, and Martha finds out that he's on his way finally. So she goes out to meet him, and her first words were, Lord, if you'd have just been here, my brother would not have died. But then she says, but I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask. See, this lady was walking in faith, even though she couldn't figure out where Jesus was for 2 days. Imagine the emotions of these two ladies. Sent out word to Jesus, and he doesn't come, and he doesn't come, and he doesn't go. Where is he? Maybe we should send another message. Doesn't he care? We thought we were good friends. Not looking at it now. Not looking like it now. These are things that you think about when we are in these storms in our life. But as she met Jesus, if you'd just been here, he wouldn't have died. But even now, I know that whatever you ask, God will give it to you. And Jesus said, your brother will rise again. And Mary says, well, I know he'll rise in the resurrection. And they had a little conversation there. And so soon Martha went back. She told her sister Mary that Jesus was here. And Mary left the house right away and went out to meet Jesus. And a bunch of people who were there that were mourning and grieving this in pain with this loss of Lazarus went with her. When Mary got to Jesus, the first thing she says is, if you'd have just been here, Lazarus wouldn't have died. Now get this. Jesus, it says when he saw Mary and Martha and the rest of the people, and they were mourning and weeping, deep pain and grief, he says he was deeply moved. His heart of compassion, they were deeply moved by what he saw in other people. He was deeply moved by just seeing the pain, the anguish, the storm these guys were in. So Jesus said, where is he? And they said, he's in his tomb. Let's go there. So they go there, and again, when Jesus got to the tomb and he saw all this pain, we get to verse 35. The shortest verse in the Bible. And I'm sure it's the first verse I ever memorized, but it never meant like it does now. It says that Jesus wept. His heart of compassion came out. Jesus wept. And the story goes on that they went out to the tomb and rolled the stone away. And Jesus said, Lazarus, come out. Another one of his long prayers. And he came out. Lazarus was raised from the dead. He came out. And it goes on to say that that day, many of the Jews who were there comforting Mary and Martha believed in him. And so we get to what Toby was sharing this morning about enduring. God asking us to walk through our trials. You see, he could take us out of there. And it's like you said, I had it in my notes. He could have took Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego out of it, but he asked them to walk through it. He could have asked Daniel. He could have just took that away from him. But he asked him to walk through it, walking in faith. And even Jesus Christ, when he was enduring the cross, Jesus said, I could have had 10,000 or thousands and thousands of angels to come and to destroy the world and to set him free, but he didn't. Even Jesus Christ walked through for you and for me. Hebrews 12, verse 1 and 2, it says, let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. Did you catch that? The race that is marked out for us. The race that is marked out for us may include a lot of storms, or some bad storms, or some whatever. It may include that. God just asks us to endure. Run the race with perseverance. Run it walking in faith, walking by faith, and not by sight. It goes on to say, we fix our eyes on Jesus, who is the author, the pioneer, or the perfecter of our faith. You see, through these storms, he's perfecting our faith. Who for the joy set before him endured the cross. Did you ever think about what that joy was? It was you and me. It was set before him. And it caused him, and made him eager, I believe, to endure that cross so we can have relationship and spend all of eternity with him. Some observations that I've made. It's been 14 months now, and it's been long enough I've had time to look back and glean a few things that I'd like to share with us this morning. Like I said, it's just been a hard year, and I'm not at all a place where I could say I'm over it, it's done, it's gone, and there's still hard days sometimes. But this is some observations that I want us to know. And the first thing is this, that the devil is eager and he's ready to attack us when we are at our most vulnerable place. When our faith is in such a place where it's perhaps the weak, he is just eager and ready to pound and pound and pound at us, and to chip away at our faith and just pound us with all sorts of questions that causes us to think about who is God and is he real, and all these things. He's just trying to erode our faith, and it's so real, and he's so adamant about it, and he just keeps coming and keeps coming and keeps coming. I couldn't believe it. The first few weeks after that, I just couldn't believe how he just kept pounding me with things. And when you look at life with your eyes fixed on what is seen, it's not that hard for doubt to creep in. I've struggled with some of that. Are you who you say you are? Are you going to do what it says here? Because I don't feel it all the time. Many times I don't feel like, lo, I'm with you always. You came to heal the brokenhearted. Not feeling it. So he pounds at you and he pounds at you. As much as I'd like to say be ready for it, I don't know how you ever prepare for it. But be aware that the devil is eager to pounce on you and to chip away at your faith and to weaken you. I think he even calls it a victory if he can just weaken you down to 80% from what you were. We'll work on it some more later then, and maybe we can get him down to 50%. He's sly. He's like a roaring lion just walking around, seeing who he can devour, trying to erode our faith. I read recently like a snake and an eagle. When a snake goes in an eagle's nest and attacks, probably trying to get eggs or whatever, and the snake and eagle start fighting, what the eagle does, it grabs the snake and it takes off in flight, because now the snake can't fight because it doesn't have anything to work off of. It's just helpless. It can't fight. So what the eagle does is it takes the snake from his battleground and takes it into his battleground. And now he can be victorious. And that's what we need to do. We do not battle the devil on his battleground. Get out of there and take him to fight him with Ephesians 6. Read that. Fight him with that. Fight him with Scripture. Fight him in the Lord's battleground. Take him out of there. Take him away from his strength and where he battles. I just love that analogy. Again, the devil is eager and ready to attack you. The second thing I just noticed, sometimes in the middle of a storm, our emotions can cause us to think that God isn't listening. He doesn't hear us. He doesn't care about us. He's in the back sleeping, or he's just walking right on by, or like he's waiting 2 days to come. It can feel that way when our eyes are fixed on what is seen. We can't understand things. I think that's just kind of normal, and don't dwell on that. Look at your faith in God and dwell on that and walk in faith. God sees the bigger picture. The third thing I want to point out is that I really believe this. It gives me hope that every storm that God allows or even sends us into is meant to grow us. Yeah. God has a plan for us. In the midst of a storm, we can't see it, but his priorities, his values are just different than ours. His ways are higher than ours. His thoughts are higher, as high as the heavens, above the earth. That's how much higher his ways are and his thoughts are in us. Think on these things. He's more interested in our character than he is in our comfort. We, of course, pretend to pursue comfort. I've noticed that these 3 stories that I alluded to, at the end of every story, there was a greater revelation of Jesus himself. And I believe that for every storm that we walk through, or that we're in the middle of, Jesus will give us a greater revelation of himself. Have worship team just come up. I want to wrap it up a little bit with this. If you notice on the north side of the church by the entrance, there's a memorial that is dedicated to Caden. There's a prayer bench that I want to thank the church for honoring him in that way. And on that bench, there's these 2 words that say, even if. And it's been mentioned here in the congregation several times. But I want to give a little backstory to that. As we as a family have this tradition where someone has a birthday, we get together and have a birthday party. And several years ago, we started doing this thing where everyone at the table, we just one by one, we just kind of go around and we say something nice or positive or something we appreciate about the person that has a birthday. And we did that for a year, and then the next year we changed it up a little. I don't remember what we did. Anyway, 2021 came around, and we decided that the person having the birthday would read their favorite chapter to the rest of us. And so October came. It was Caden's birthday, and he's 16 now. It was his last birthday. He's 16. And so he reads the story of Daniel 3. And it's a story of like the Jews were down in captivity in Babylon. And it's a story where Nebuchadnezzar, he had this big golden image built, and his command was that when the music starts, that everyone bows down and worships this image that he had built. And this was a problem for these 3 Hebrew guys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And the music starts, and they didn't bow down. and somebody tattled on him, told the king, made him mad, and he told him to come here. You want to talk to him? So he chews him out, and he says, I'll make a deal with you. We'll do this again, and when the music starts, you guys bow down, we'll just pretend nothing happened in the past, we'll just let it go. So we get to verse 16. It says, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied, O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, which that was the punishment for not bowing down to this image. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God whom we serve is able to save us, and he will rescue us from your power. But even if he doesn't, we want to make it clear to you that we will never serve your gods or worship the golden statue you have set up. And the story goes on that these three guys didn't bow down to the image. They were thrown in the furnace, and there appeared like 4 guys in there, and Nebuchadnezzar called them out, and he repents. But as Caden read this, when he was done, this is my memory of it, he kind of, and he goes, the thing that impressed me here is that these 3 guys, they said, we know our God can deliver us, but even if he doesn't, our God will deliver us. Or that even if he doesn't, we're not going to serve your God. And that's the backstory here. But you see what's going on here. The Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego, they have this big storm before them. You see, and they are choosing to walk in faith. And they're telling him, what they're really saying is that we have total confidence in our God. We believe in him totally, walking in faith, that he can deliver us. And they probably had some ideas of how he would do this. But even if he doesn't do it the way we think he probably will, because that's what we do when we're in storms. We kind of figure out how God's going to fix this. But even if he doesn't fix it the way we think he will, or should, or the way that makes sense, we're not going to serve your God. I just want to stand here this morning and tell you, even if God doesn't fix it the way I think, I'm not going to bow down to anything else. We need to walk through these storms and walk them in faith and not by sight. I've asked the worship team to play this song again, Waymaker, because you see, God is working even when we don't see it. He's working when we think he's at the back of the boat sleeping. He's working when it seems like he's just going to walk right on past, or he doesn't show up for 2 days. He's working. He has a bigger plan for us than we know. He's working. I just want to, the way the service started out this morning with Toby sharing what he did, and I was sitting there listening. There are rivers of water waiting for us to walk through. I believe that God is speaking to us this morning and wanting to encourage us to persevere, to endure, to keep on, to keep on. And if you're in the middle of a battle right now, whatever it is. You know, you just want somebody to pray. Come on up, and as we play this song, I don't know how God's going to fix yours. I don't know when He's going to fix it. But I'm convinced He'll fix it in His time and His way. His ways and His thoughts are high above ours.